Born and raised in Boston, Massachusetts in the United States, Duke began his military career by enlisting in the US Army's 75th Ranger Regiment. He completed Ranger School with honours and quickly rose through the ranks thanks to his natural leadership and tactical awareness. After receiving his promotion to First Sergeant, Duke was detailed with an intervention in the Caribbean. Local insurgents had recently taken control of an airport on one of its many small islands, and Duke and his men had been given the task of taking it back. Boarding a transport plane, they travelled to the island, and once above the airport, the plane circles as Duke gives the order to jump. Landing first on the airport's runway, Duke quickly organised his men to get ready to attack, and leading from the front, he and his men stormed the airport's control tower. It is a swift, hard fight, and the insurgents are no match for Duke and his men, and they soon take back the airport. As Duke and his men start to gather up any surviving insurgents, he contacts an AWACS that had been circling overhead monitoring the operation. He reports that the control tower and airport have been taken back and it was safe to start landing planes again. Later that day, a plane lands carrying the Rangers' colonel, and Duke heads over to greet him. Once off the plane, the colonel tells Duke that he has won himself a commission after today's actions, and that he is to report back stateside on the next plane. Duke can't believe he's being made an officer and thanks the colonel, but he also points out that there's still insurgents left on the island. The colonel tells Duke that the main operation is over, and that all that is left now is the mopping up. He continues on and tells Duke that the insurgents needed money to finance their activities, but as they are airlifting the island's bank reserves back to the United States for safekeeping, the insurgency would soon die down. And with that, he orders Duke to get aboard the plane, taking the island's reserves back to the States. Boarding the airplane, Duke sits himself down next to the medics treating the wounded, and once airborne, sits back and starts to relax. Watching the medics treat the wounded, he can't help but notice that the two MPs guarding the island's reserves had not spoken during the flight. When suddenly, the two MPs stand up and aim their weapons at Duke and the medics, shouting at them not to move. Duke notices that their accents are not American and questions who they are. The two MPs take off their helmets, and they tell Duke that they killed the real MPs back at the airport and took their places. Duke realises that they are die-hard insurgents from the island. The lead insurgent laughs at Duke and the others, thanking them for helping them get the money off the island. He then proceeds to tell the other insurgent to get the harnesses ready. It is at this point that Duke realises what the insurgents are up to. They are going to pull the old DB Cooper trick of skyjacking a plane and bailing out with the money over a remote location. It is at that moment the cargo hatch opens, and one of the aircrew appears. Thinking quickly, Duke suddenly dives at the aircrew, knocking him and himself back through the hatch, with the door slamming behind them as the insurgents open fire. Furious with Duke, the insurgents know that through that hatch was the island's reserves, and they give him 10 seconds to open up the hatch or they will start to kill the medics and the hostages. The insurgents start to count down from 10, as the medics plead for mercy. A voice suddenly shouts out that they are going to open the hatch. The insurgents suddenly burst in to find a wounded aircrew and Duke lying in a bloodied heap. The wounded aircrew informs them that they got Duke when he dived through the hatch. Laughing at Duke's demise, they start to check the bags for the money, and sure enough, the bags are stuffed with green dollars. And with that, they start to attach the money bags to the parachutes provided for the plane. After taking control of the plane, the insurgents wait till the plane is over a small group of what looks like deserted islands, and they start to throw the money bags out of the plane. Once the last bag is out of the plane, the lead insurgent turns to the rest of the hostages and tells them that with no radio, they won't be able to contact anyone, and by the time they do, they will be long gone. And with that, they bid farewell to them and jump out of the plane, parachuting down with the money. Landing on the beach with the money bags, the insurgents start to celebrate the success of their mission. And while they are celebrating, a fast motorboat comes into view with fellow insurgents on board who had been waiting for the drop. The lead insurgent then reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small remote device. Laughing, he tells the other insurgent that the plane is far away enough now, and that it's unfortunate that he forgot to mention about the package that they left on board, a bomb. But unknown to the insurgents, one of the money bags starts to move as a knife starts cutting through it. The insurgent is about to press the button when he is tackled by Duke as he bursts forth from one of the money bags, knocking the remote from his hand. Duke then grabs the M60 that was next to the insurgent and aims it at the others. Smiling at them, he tells them that he hit himself in one of the money bags when they were not looking. Too bad for you. Cursing Duke, the insurgents tell him there is only one of him against all of them. But Duke coldly replies back, he only needs one target. And with that, Duke sends a burst of fire from the M60 into the motorboat's fuel, causing it to explode in a fireball, taking out all the insurgents. Later that day, Duke wakes on the beach as the US forces start to turn up after being told of the situation once the plane landed. He is greeted by his men in a motor launch, who tell him that there is a major who wants to meet him and that he is from the newly formed Action Force, which was an anti-terrorist unit. Duke watches on as a helicopter approaches and starts to land next to him. Once it lands, a tough-looking major jumps out and introduces himself as Flag. He observes the dead insurgents and the destroyed motor launch, and he tells Duke that he can see by the look of things that Duke is a natural-born counter-terrorist leader, and he is looking for sergeants just like him to join Action Force. Duke is flattered by the offer, but points out that he was about to be made an officer. But Flag continues on, telling Duke that officers aren't that important in Action Force, as they have highly skilled individual specialists, and that Action Force needs leaders for squads of such men. Duke is a bit apprehensive and tells the Major that he won his airborne wings years ago, and now the Major wants him to take the biggest plunge of his career. Weeks later, at a secret Action Force training base, Duke is putting some of Action Force's new recruits through some drill exercises. Major Flag watches on, happy that the sergeant took him up on his offer, and thinks to himself that the Airborne has lost a good lieutenant, but Action Force has gained a great top sergeant. The end.